They say a man only realizes how fragile his world is when it shatters beneath his feet. I never thought that would be me. For 11 years, I had a life most men would envy. A beautiful wife, 2 wonderful kids, our son, Lucas, whom we had together, and Jake, my wife's son from her first marriage. I loved Jake as if he were my own. He was just a kid when I married his mother, and in many ways, I raised him. Our home was the kind people slow down to admire, nestled in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, complete with a white picket fence and a backyard big enough for summer barbecues and touch football games. I worked a stable job, provided for my family, and trusted my wife, Emily, without question. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. It started with the little things. Emily's sudden interest in her appearance, new perfume, a gym membership, expensive lingerie that I never saw her wear for me. Her late nights, always with a convenient excuse. And Jake, he had become distant, secretive, and oddly protective of her. Then, there was Lucas' best friend, Ryan. He had been practically living at our house since he was a kid. I never minded. I wanted my son to have good friends, and Ryan was always polite, always respectful. But there was something about the way Emily looked at him. I pushed the thought away. No. That's absurd. One night, Emily said she was going out with some girlfriends. Lucas was at a sleepover, and I planned for a quiet night at home. But then, I realized I had forgotten my wallet at work. The office wasn't far. I figured I'd grab it and surprise Emily with her favorite dessert from the bakery on the way home. It was almost 9:30 p.m. when I pulled into our driveway, expecting darkness. Instead, the lights were on. And then I heard it. Laughter. Muffled voices. A rustling from inside. A gut instinct told me to move quietly. I walked around the side of the house, peering through the living room window. The curtains weren't fully closed. I wish they had been. There she was, my wife, half-dressed, on the couch. But she wasn't alone. Ryan was there. Lucas' best friend. The boy I had watched grow up in my home. And Jake. My wife. With her own son. My stomach turned, bile rising in my throat. I stumbled back, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes had just seen. I didn't remember walking to the front door. I didn't remember opening it. But I remembered the way their faces changed the moment they saw me standing there. Emily gasped, pulling a blanket over herself. Ryan shot to his feet, his face pale. And Jake. Jake just sat there, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smirk. As if he knew. As if he had been waiting for me to find out. The words clawed their way up my throat, but all that came out was a hoarse whisper. What the hell is going on here? For a moment, nobody moved. The room was thick with the kind of silence that only comes when everyone knows something unspeakable has just been exposed. The air smelled of sweat, cheap perfume, and something else, something foul. Emily was the first to react. She clutched the blanket around herself as if it could shield her from reality.
Honey, it's not what it looks like.
She stammered, her voice trembling. Not what it looks like. Ryan stood frozen, his hands shaking as he reached for his shirt. He wouldn't look at me. Jake, on the other hand, leaned back against the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. He even smirked.
Actually,
Jake said, stretching his arms behind his head.
it's exactly what it looks like.
I wanted to hit him. I wanted to put my fist through his smug face and hear his teeth crack under my knuckles. But I couldn't move. The world was spinning. My vision blurred. This can't be real. Emily stood up, clutching the blanket against her chest.
Listen, please.
She pleaded, stepping toward me.
I can explain.
Explain. Explain what? That she had been sleeping with our son's best friend? That she had been sleeping with her own son? I stumbled back, needing distance from whatever twisted reality I had just walked into. My back hit the wall, and I gripped the doorway like it was the only thing holding me upright. I turned to Ryan, who was frantically pulling on his jeans. I growled. How could you do this? Lucas is your best friend. Ryan's face was red with shame.
I never meant.
He stopped, rubbing his hands over his face.
She came on to me, man.
I turned to Emily. She flinched. Is that true? I asked, my voice ice cold. Did you seduce our son's best friend? Tears welled in her eyes.
I made a mistake.
A mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pay the water bill. A mistake is burning dinner. This was evil. But it wasn't even the worst of it. Because Jake wasn't ashamed. He wasn't scared or guilty. He was grinning.
You want to hear something funny?
Jake said, standing up and stretching, his muscles tense beneath his bare skin.
Ryan here is just the warm-up act.
The room felt suddenly too small. I stared at my stepson, my mind screaming at me not to ask, not to let the words leave my mouth. But I had to know. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake tilted his head, as if debating whether to answer. Then he shrugged.
Mom and I have been sleeping together for months.
Everything inside me shattered. Months. A sharp ringing filled my ears. I felt detached from my own body, floating in a sea of nausea and disbelief. Jake laughed at my expression. What, you thought she was a saint? Dad, wake up. She's not the perfect wife you thought she was. I snapped. With a roar, I lunged at him, grabbing him by the throat. His cocky grin disappeared as I slammed him against the wall. You sick! Emily screamed. Ryan stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. Jake clawed at my arms, his eyes wide. You think you're a man now? I snarled. You think you can smile in my face after what you've done? Jake gagged, his hands flailing.
Get off me, old man.
I should have let go. I should have stopped myself. But I couldn't. Not yet. Emily rushed forward, grabbing my arm.
Stop. You're hurting him.
I turned on her so fast she stumbled back. I'm hurting him. I shouted. I'm hurting him. Do you even hear yourself? Her lips trembled. Tears streaked her face, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I released Jake, who crumpled to the floor, coughing and rubbing his neck. For a long time, none of us spoke. Then I exhaled, slow and controlled. You need to get out, I said, my voice eerily calm. Emily looked at me in confusion.
What?
Get out. All of you. Now. Jake wiped his mouth, chuckling.
Where do you expect us to go?
I don't care, I spat. Go to hell for all I care. Ryan bolted for the door without another word. I barely even noticed. Emily hesitated.
Please, we can.
Get out. She flinched. And then she went. Jake followed, grumbling under his breath. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't move until the front door slammed shut behind them. Then I collapsed onto the couch, my hands trembling. And for the first time in my life, I cried. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Hours. Time lost all meaning as I stared at the walls of the house that no longer felt like home. The silence was deafening. Lucas wasn't here. Thank God. My innocent little boy, my only real family, was at a sleepover, oblivious to the nightmare his father had just walked into. And Emily. Jake. Ryan. They were gone. For now. My body felt numb, but my mind was racing. A hurricane of questions, of memories, of realizations that made my stomach churn. Had I really been this blind? Looking back, there were signs. The way Jake had always been a little too close to his mother. The way Emily's affection toward me had slowly faded into something mechanical, forced. But I never imagined this. I stood up on shaky legs and wandered through the house. Every room felt tainted. The couch where I had found them. The kitchen table where we had once shared family dinners. Even our bedroom, my bedroom now, felt like a crime scene. I had to get out. Grabbing my keys, I left without a destination. I just drove, the hum of the engine the only sound in the otherwise silent night. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, my mind playing a loop of what I had seen, what I had heard. Jake's smug grin. Emily's pathetic excuses. Ryan's shame. And then the words that would haunt me forever. Mom and I have been sleeping together for months. I barely noticed when I pulled into a parking lot. The neon glow of a 24-hour diner flickered above me. My stomach was in knots, but my body craved something, anything, to keep me anchored to reality. I stepped inside. The place was mostly empty, save for a couple of truckers and an old man nursing a cup of coffee. A waitress, middle-aged, tired-looking, greeted me with a forced smile.
Sit anywhere you like.
I chose a booth in the corner and ordered black coffee. When she brought it over, she gave me a once-over and hesitated.
You okay, hon?
I blinked. Was it that obvious? I don't know, I admitted. She nodded, as if she had heard those words 1,000 times before.
If you need to talk, coffee's free refills.
I almost laughed. Almost. But I didn't need to talk. I needed to think. And I needed to plan. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I got home just before dawn. The house was still empty. I had hoped, prayed, that it had all been a nightmare, that I would walk in and everything would be as it was before. But reality doesn't work like that. I dragged myself upstairs and showered. The water was scalding, but I barely felt it. I scrubbed my skin raw, as if I could wash away the filth, the betrayal. When I got out, I checked my phone. One missed call. Emily. I stared at the screen. My hands itched to call her back, to demand answers, to scream at her until my throat bled. Instead, I deleted the notification. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. A few hours later, I picked Lucas up from his sleepover. He was all smiles, bouncing into the car with his backpack slung over one shoulder.
Hey Dad, guess what? We stayed up till 2 a.m.
I forced a smile. Yeah. Sounds like fun, bud. He nodded, oblivious to the war raging inside me.
Where's Mom?
My grip tightened on the wheel. She had to go somewhere for a bit. It wasn't a lie. Not really. Lucas frowned but didn't push.
Is Jake home?
I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. No. He looked out the window, processing this.
Okay.
I changed the subject, asking about his night, his friends, anything to keep him from noticing the cracks in my voice. But as I listened to him ramble about video games and pizza, one thought kept echoing in my head. I have to protect him. Lucas couldn't know the truth. Not yet. Not ever. And Emily. Jake. They needed to pay. All of them. I spent the next few days acting like nothing had happened. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Lucas went to school, none the wiser. I kept my routine, woke up early, made breakfast, dropped him off, went to work. If anyone noticed anything off about me, they didn't say a word. But inside, I was unraveling. I hadn't heard from Emily since that single missed call. She hadn't come home, and I hadn't gone looking for her. I assumed she was staying with Jake. The thought made my stomach turn. I needed answers. More than that, I needed proof. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Daniel Graves, an ex-cop who looked like he had seen more than his fair share of human depravity. When I told him my situation, he didn't flinch.
People are animals.
He muttered, jotting down notes.
Some just hide it better than others.
I gave him everything, Emily's phone number, Jake's, even Ryan's. I told him where Emily worked, the places she might go. I want records, I said. Pictures. Videos. Whatever it takes. Daniel nodded.
I'll be in touch.
I left his office feeling like a man about to go to war. And I was. For days, I waited. I didn't call Emily again. I didn't try to find Jake. I wanted them to believe I had simply walked away, that I was licking my wounds in silence. But I wasn't. I was planning. I spent my days caring for Lucas, making sure he never sensed the storm brewing around him. My nights, though. My nights were spent digging into every little secret Emily had hidden from me. And then, I got the call. It was Daniel, the private investigator. His voice was flat, professional, but I could hear something else in the background, something that sounded a lot like disgust.
Got something for you.
He said.
Meet me.
We met at a diner just outside of town. It was a run-down little place, the kind where the coffee is always burnt, and the waitress has seen it all. Daniel slid a manila folder across the table.
Go ahead.
He said.
Take a look.
I hesitated. Some part of me already knew what I was about to see. But knowing and seeing are two very different things. I opened the folder. And my stomach turned to stone. There were pictures. Dozens of them. Emily and Jake. Together. In a hotel room. In a parked car. Even in my house. There were timestamps on each one, some dating back over a year. A year. My hands clenched around the edges of the folder. Daniel must have noticed the way my breathing changed because he spoke, his tone unusually careful.
You all right?
I didn't answer. Because no, I wasn't all right. I was staring at undeniable proof that my wife, the mother of my child, had been betraying me in the most disgusting way possible. And it wasn't just her. Jake, the boy I had raised, the boy I had treated as my own, was looking into the camera in some of these pictures. Smirking. Like this was some kind of game to him. I forced myself to breathe. How did you get these? I asked, my voice hollow. Daniel sipped his coffee.
Had to do a little digging. Found out Emily's been booking hotel rooms under fake names. Paid in cash, too. She was careful, just not careful enough.
I nodded slowly, my mind whirling. Emily was smart. She knew how to cover her tracks. But she didn't count on me digging this deep. She didn't count on me fighting back. I closed the folder, sliding it back toward Daniel. I need copies of everything. Daniel raised an eyebrow.
Planning on taking this to a lawyer?
I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. Oh, I'm planning on taking it somewhere, I said. Just not yet. For the next 3 days, I played the part of the grieving husband. I kept to myself. I didn't answer Emily's calls. I didn't reach out to Jake. I let them believe I was drowning in heartbreak. But I wasn't. I was waiting. Watching. I needed them to feel safe. Because when people feel safe, they get sloppy. And Emily? She had no idea what was coming. On the 4th day, I called her. She answered on the 2nd ring.
David.
She breathed, her voice cautious.
I didn't think you'd call.
I wasn't going to, I admitted. But we need to talk. A pause. Then, carefully, I don't know if that's a good idea. I let out a humorless laugh. Funny. You didn't seem to care about what was a good idea when you were my stepson. Silence. I could feel her guilt through the phone.
I never wanted to hurt you.
She whispered. Lie. You already did, I said. But we can talk about that in person. She hesitated.
Where?
That little cafe downtown. Tomorrow morning. No Jake. Just you and me. Another pause. Then, finally.
Okay.
Hook. Line. And sinker. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early. I took a booth near the back, where I could see everything. When Emily walked in, she looked different. She had lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. Good. She sat down across from me, fidgeting with the napkin in front of her.
I don't even know where to start.
She admitted. Start with the truth, I said. All of it. Her hands trembled.
I never meant for it to happen.
I stared at her. Another lie.
It started small.
She continued, her voice breaking.
Jake, he was struggling. He felt abandoned by his real father, and I just wanted to be there for him. I know, David. It was a mistake.
I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. On the screen, a picture of her and Jake, one of many from the file Daniel had given me. You call this a mistake? I asked. Emily paled. Her fingers hovered over the screen as if touching it would burn her.
Where did you get this?
I leaned back. I hired someone. Turns out, you're not as good at hiding things as you thought. Her breath hitched.
Oh, my God.
You don't get to be shocked, I snapped. You did this. You destroyed our family. She wiped her eyes.
David, please.
You're going to do something for me, I interrupted. She swallowed hard.
What?
You're going to sign over everything, I said. The house. The car. Custody of Lucas. Her mouth fell open.
No. No, I can't.
I leaned forward, lowering my voice. If you don't, I take these pictures to the police. Her breath caught.
You wouldn't.
I smiled. Wouldn't I? Emily sat there, frozen. She knew. She knew I had her. You have until the end of the week, I said, grabbing my phone. Make the right choice. I stood up and walked out without looking back. Phase 1, complete. I didn't hear from Emily for 2 days. I expected that. She was panicking, trying to figure out a way out of the noose I had tightened around her neck. But there was no way out. On the 3rd day, she called. Her voice was weak.
David, can we talk?
We already did, I said flatly.
I mean, can we talk again? Please.
I let the silence stretch long enough for her to squirm. Then I said, fine. Come to the house. She hesitated.
The house?
Yes, Emily. The house you're about to sign over to me. Silence. Then.
I'll be there in an hour.
She arrived exactly 60 minutes later. I watched from the window as she sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her together. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I opened the door before she had a chance to knock. Come in. Emily stepped inside cautiously, as if she was afraid the walls might cave in on her. She looked around, probably realizing for the first time that this wasn't her home anymore. I led her to the kitchen table. Sitting in the center were the documents, a quitclaim deed for the house, a custody agreement, and a divorce settlement. She eyed them warily.
You really want to take everything from me?
She whispered. You took everything from me first, I said. She looked down, ashamed.
I know.
Then sign. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. She flipped through the papers, her breath hitching when she saw Lucas' custody agreement.
I don't want to lose my son,
she said, her voice breaking. I leaned forward. You already lost him, Emily. The moment you decided to sleep with your own son, you lost everything. Tears slipped down her cheeks.
You're going to tell him, aren't you?
I exhaled slowly. I haven't decided, I admitted. But what I do know is that you are never going to be alone with him again. Her shoulders shook.
Please, David.
Sign the papers, Emily. She sniffled, wiped her eyes, and, with shaking fingers, put the pen to the page. She signed everything. When she was done, she sat back, looking hollow.
What now?
She whispered. I gathered the papers and stood. Now, you leave. She hesitated.
And if I don't?
I pulled out my phone and showed her the email draft I had ready to send to her boss, her family, and the police. Her eyes widened in terror. I smiled. Your choice. Emily stood. She walked to the door slowly, almost as if she was waiting for me to stop her. I didn't. She stepped onto the porch, turned to say something, but I shut the door in her face. And just like that, Emily was gone. Phase 2, complete. Emily was out of my life. But Jake wasn't. Not yet. And he had no idea what was coming. I let him think he was safe. I didn't call. I didn't confront him. I wanted him to feel comfortable. Because comfortable people make mistakes. And Jake? He was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. 1 week after Emily signed everything over, I made my move. I started small. An anonymous email to his college. It contained photos. Explicit, undeniable proof of what he had been doing with his own mother. Within 24 hours, Jake was expelled. His scholarship? Gone. His reputation? Destroyed. But that was just the beginning. Next, I sent the pictures to his coach. His teammates. His friends. And just like that, Jake was no longer the golden boy. People looked at him differently. Whispered when he walked past. He went from being the center of attention to being a disgrace. And he had no idea it was me. Not yet. The phone rang late that night. It was Emily.
You bastard.
She screamed.
What did you do?
I smiled. What are you talking about?
Jake.
She sobbed.
You ruined his life.
I leaned back in my chair. He ruined his own life, Emily.
He called me. He said people are sending him messages, calling him sick, calling him a freak. Her voice broke. You sent those photos, didn't you?
I said nothing. Because we both knew the answer.
You promised you wouldn't.
I promised nothing, I said coldly. There was silence on the other end. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, she whispered.
I hate you.
I laughed. Not as much as I hate you. And then I hung up. Phase 3, complete. But I still wasn't done. Because now it was time for the police. The next morning, I went to the police. I walked into the station, calm and collected, with a USB drive in my pocket. When the officer at the desk asked how he could help me, I simply said, "I have evidence of a serious crime." They took me to a private room. A detective came in, middle-aged, tired eyes, the kind of guy who had seen everything. Except this. I handed him the USB.
What's on it?
He asked. I met his gaze. Proof that my wife has been having a sexual relationship with her own son. His face didn't change, but I saw the flicker of shock in his eyes.
You sure about this?
He asked. I nodded. Watch the footage. I sat there while he plugged the drive into his laptop. While he clicked through the photos, videos, messages. At first, he was quiet. Then, I heard him exhale sharply.
Jesus Christ.
He clicked out of the folder and leaned back.
This is bad.
I know. He studied me.
Why now?
Because I wanted to make sure she had nothing left before she went down, I admitted. No money. No home. No one to protect her. The detective let out a low whistle.
You planned this.
I didn't respond.
All right, he said, closing his laptop. We'll launch an investigation immediately, but I'll warn you, this is going to get messy. The media, the courts, it won't be quiet.
I don't care, I said. As long as she pays. It didn't take long for the police to move. 2 days later, they arrested Emily. Jake, too. The charges? Say **Almy **** duct. In ***STCOR **** ion of AM **** or. They dragged them out of the apartment Jake had been staying in. Emily was crying. Jake was shouting. But it didn't matter. Because it was over. And I made sure everyone knew. I sent the news articles to her old boss. To our neighbors. To her family. There was no hiding from this. She was done. Lucas never found out the full truth. I told him his mother had to go away for a long time. That Jake had made mistakes. That we were better off without them. And we were. I sold the house and moved us to a new town. A fresh start. Emily wrote to me once from prison. I never opened the letter. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was nothing. And for the first time in a long, long time, I finally felt free. Justice had been served.